Hello and welcome to Styled to Sell workshop. In this workshop, we are going to cover why site design matters, and you are going to learn actionable tips to style your website or sales page for maximum impact. And you're also going to understand foundational design principles that increase conversions. This workshop is perfect for you if you've been stuck trying to design your website or sales page for what feels like forever, and you want a website that not only looks good but also helps you convert, and you want to have a website or a sales page that feels like you. Now, before we dive into this workshop, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Ana Lea. I am the head creative and designer behind Lea Design Studio. I've been a web designer since 2012, and I'm on a mission to make great web design accessible to everyone. So first, let's talk about why good design matters. So first impressions are crucial. We all know this. Design can make or break trust within seconds. If you look at the website like this, no matter how great it is and no matter how accurate their information might be, you're not really inclined to stay to explore and see what all they have to offer. But if you come across a website like this that has a clean layout and it has images that speak to the target audience and look professional, you're much more likely to click around and see what's going on the website, what this person has to offer, and to learn more about them. On top of that, a clean and cohesive layout improves usability and reduces bounce rates. Now, if you look at this website, you can see that the entire website is overwhelming and there's just so much going on, and I'm not entirely sure where I'm supposed to look and what I'm supposed to do. There's just too many elements that are competing for attention. And honestly, it makes me want to leave the website and find another car dealership. Contrary to that, here we have a clean and cohesive layout for a sales page that uses colors that aren't too bright, nothing is too clashing, nothing is really competing for attention, and the layout is clean and cohesive, and it makes me want to read this sales page and see what this person has to offer and what this program is all about. So based on those two websites that I just showed you, it's clear that design is often used as a selling tool. Aesthetics do influence purchasing decisions. We all know how much care Apple puts into its packaging, and we all know that unpackaging an Apple product is basically an experience in and of itself. Similarly, if you take a look at this packaging, it just makes you want to have a cup of tea. And honestly, I'm not sure which package I should reach for first because honestly, I want to have them all, even though I'm not a big tea drinker. But the packaging is attractive and it makes me want to taste every single one of them. So if you want to have that kind of impact on your purchasers, and if you want your design to actually help you sell your offers, then the first step is finding your visual style. Your website therefore needs to appeal to your ideal clients, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't need to reflect your personality. After all, your website is an extension of your brand, and if you have a personal brand, if it's just you, then that personality and the personality of your online brand and your programs are often very, very similar, and there is a very close intersection between the two. So therefore, I'm one of the designers that firmly believes that your website also needs to reflect your personality. That means you should not ignore your favorite colors or your unique style preferences. And that's because your ideal clients are similar to you. In other words, they will have similar style and color preferences, so there is absolutely no reason why you should steer clear of colors that you yourself gravitate to and that you find aesthetically pleasing. But how do you actually go about finding your visual style? So the first step is to discover what your own personality is and how you want to be perceived online. Then after that, you need to describe your ideal clients and their aesthetics. And once you're clear on that, then you want to look for an overlap between your personality and preferences and that of your ideal clients. Those are the words that you should focus on in your research phase, which we'll get to in a moment. On top of that, I want you to think about what are some feelings and words that you do not want people to associate with your brand. And I also want you to think about how you want your ideal clients to feel when they land on your website or your sales page, when they're interacting with your social media posts, when they come across your brand anywhere else online. On top of that, take note of the words that describe what you do, as again, this is something that will come in handy during the research phase. But before we go into the research, we need to take a brief moment and talk about color psychology. So, what is color psychology? It's essentially the study of how color impacts our perception of brands and the emotion behind it. And each color can have a different feel based on not only the color, but the tint. Tint is basically when you add white to a color to make it lighter. The shade, when you add a black color to the original color to make it darker, or the tone of the color, which is when you simply add a gray to make it more muted. And when you're narrowing down your colors, I want you to think about the tint and shade as well as the positive qualities and how they may impact the feel of your brand. This is important because choosing the correct color is not enough. Often, different tints or different shades of the color or even different tones of one color can have completely different meanings and feelings than the original color. For example, pink feels soft and delicate, while ruby or burgundy feels rich and luxurious. But at the same time, if you have baby pink, that will probably feel very soft and delicate, but if you have something like hot pink, that will feel very bold and in your face. Similarly, if you have ruby and burgundy, that will feel rich and luxurious, but if you have pure red or just very bright red, it might start to feel a little bit spammy and a little bit cheap. So again, that there are variations not just in how different colors feel, but also how different tints and shades and tones of the colors feel. Now we have primary colors, which are red, blue, and yellow. And then we have the secondary colors, which are green, purple, and orange, which are basically derived from mixing primary colors together. And then we have the tertiary colors, which are derived from mixing primary and secondary colors together. And it's also important to note that some of the colors feel cool, like blue and purple and green, while others feel warm, like orange and red and yellow. So again, those are just some of the things that you want to keep in mind as you're choosing colors for your website or your sales page, depending on what you're working on. And as I've mentioned before, we have different tints and shades and tones. Tints are basically when you add white to the original color. You get shades when you add black to the original color, and then you get different tones when you add gray to the original color. And you can see how these different tints and shades and tones evoke different feelings when you look at them. So now that we have that covered, let's talk about the meaning behind each color. So first we have red. And red creates very strong reactions in different ways. It can evoke anger or elicit desire, and it also acts as a stimulant. Depending on the actual tint or shade or tone, it can be seen as a sign of aggression or an expression of love. Positive qualities that are associated with red include ambition, power, love, strength, and passion. Orange is the middle ground between red and yellow, and it's often associated with joy, enthusiasm, happiness, and overall positive, happy-go-lucky feelings. Lighter shades usually appeal to an upscale market, while peach tones work well with healthcare, restaurants, and beauty salons. Positive qualities of orange are optimistic, creative, energetic, social, confident, and courageous. Next up is yellow. This is typically the color associated with happiness, cheer, and obviously sunshine, but it can also be seen as childlike in certain tones, so it won't be the best choice to convey a level of sophistication, for example. Positive qualities that are associated with yellow are warm, happy, creative, fun, enthusiastic, and cheerful. Green is the color of nature, and it's most often associated with growth, harmony, spring, and freshness. It's also associated with money, and in some cultures, it can be associated with envy. Green's positive qualities are fresh, kind, balanced, giving, caring, calm, and loyal. Blue essentially has the opposite effect to red. They suppress rather than ignite, but similarly to reds, blues are multifaceted. Depending on the tone or the shade or the tint that you pick, they can be seen as cold, sad, and depressing, but also they can be seen as relaxing, tranquil, and calm. Positive qualities associated with blue are patient, loyal, imaginative, trustworthy, calm, relaxing, and peaceful. Purple combines blue and red and is often associated with royalty. It symbolizes power, mobility, luxury, and conveys the feelings of independence, but also mystery, creativity, and magic. Positive qualities associated with purple are that it's seen as a dignified color, intuitive, luxurious, mysterious, sensitive, passionate, and also supportive. Pink is a tint of red, and as such, it has some similarities to red. Hot pinks convey energy, youthfulness, fun, and excitement, while dusty pinks appear sentimental. Lighter pinks are seen as more romantic. Positive qualities associated with pink are affection, optimism, gentleness, femininity, compassion, and nurturing. Brown can be seen as a boring color, but it's an earthy color that conveys simplicity, durability, and stability. Certain shades of brown, like terracotta, can convey an upscale look, and it's often used to denote earthy, comforting, grounded, safe, welcoming, and cozy feelings. The color gray is a mix of black and white and is another neutral color. It is often associated with wisdom, conformism, stability, and impartiality. Darker shades of gray can be seen as oppressive, dull, and depressing, while later shades can add a touch of sophistication. Positive qualities that are associated with gray is that it's seen as a graceful, sleek, reliable, secure, intelligent, and mature. White is essentially the absence of color. It symbolizes light, innocence, purity, and cleanliness, and when used in design, it gives off an airy, lightweight feeling. White often evokes the feelings of pureness, cleanliness, freshness, simplicity, and openness. Black is the combination of all colors, and even though it can have negative connotations, it's also associated with power, elegance, and prestige. It does well to bring all other colors to life, but if you're not careful, it can also create a very heavy and oppressive vibe as well. Some of the positive qualities is that it evokes strong, elegant, dramatic, formal, and sophisticated feelings. When you think about those color meanings, I want you to pause and think about what colors make sense for your brand. And once you're clear on that, you want to move on to the next step, which is research. This part is basically where you use the keywords that you've defined above, plus the colors that you noted down, and you start researching inspiration on sites like Pinterest and Unsplash. Now, the first step is to create a secret board on Pinterest and then save images that speak to you. And you want to use sections within Pinterest board to group similar items together. So you would create sections for patterns, one for fashion, one for fonts, etc. As far as what to pin, you want to look for colors, patterns, words, people, landscape, architecture, fabrics, foliage. The more variety you add to this board, the better it will be in the long run. And you want to find some close-up images as well as some that are further away. A few additional ideas that you can search for include office spaces, home decor, other brand identities, and quotes. At this point, you don't want to censor yourself. You want to collect as many images as you can. And once you've done that, then you can move on to the next step, which is to create your mood board. And at this point in your journey, you want to start curating the images you've saved on your Pinterest board. So I want you to get rid of any images that aren't a resounding hell yes. If the image that you saved does not provoke that kind of reaction in you, then I want you to get rid of it without any second thought or any regrets. At the end, you want to end up with around 10 to 20 final images that really speak to your soul and elicit an emotional response, because this is your visual style and this is what you will be happy looking at, and this is what will provoke a similar emotional response from your audience as well. You can download and save those images to your computer and use a tool like Canva or Adobe Illustrator if you're more proficient with Adobe to create a mood board for your brand. So once you have that mood board, then it's time to create your color palette. I want you to choose 3 to 5 colors from your mood board that you'll use throughout your website, your sales page, your brand, basically all of the other materials that you have for your brand. And you'll want to pick a main color, a neutral color, and an accent color. Your main color is basically the color that you want people to associate with your brand. Similarly to how we think of red and immediately Coca-Cola springs to our mind, I want you to choose a color that when people think about that color, people will think of your brand. This will be the dominant color on your website and other brand collateral. Then I want you to pick 2 to 3 neutral colors, which should be used as a background color or to create a more dynamic feel by alternating with your main color. And then finally, we have the accent color, which should be used to add a pop of color. You can use it for buttons, include photos that feature those pops of color, or use it as photo overlays on your website. Once you have the color palette sorted, it's time to choose the perfect fonts for your brand. So before we dive into different fonts, there are a few font pairing rules that I want you to keep in mind. The fonts that you choose for your website should be easy to read. You don't want to go overboard with fonts. I recommend using a maximum of 2 fonts because more than 2 fonts can not only slow down your website loading time, but it can also become overwhelming for your users. And as far as script fonts go, use them very sparingly because they are hard to read and don't make for a good user experience. And then I want you to create your font hierarchy. There are 5 main font types, and each one has a distinct feeling and style. Each font should have a distinct role in your brand, website, and sales page. Your primary font should help convey the feeling of your brand and tell your story. And we'll get into the different font types and their feelings in a minute. But as far as the font hierarchy goes, you want to have one heading font, one body font, and one accent font. And now let's talk about different font types. So first up, we have the serif fonts, which are easy to recognize because they have these little feet at the end. Examples of these fonts include Playfair Display, Laura, Georgia, Times New Roman. And they typically have a very sophisticated, elegant, classic, and traditional feel. Then we have sans serif, which means without the serif. So as you can see, at the ends there are no little feet, so that's why they're named sans serif. And a few examples include Open Sans, Montserrat, Railway, Lato, and others. They have a very modern, clean, simple, and chic feeling. Then we have slab serif. They're similar to serifs, as in they have the little feet at the end, but those feet appear cut off. They look like slabs. And a few examples include Roboto Slab, Nixie One, Josephine Slab, and others. They have a very friendly, approachable, and also retro feel. And then we have the script fonts, which are handwritten or cursive. And examples include Allura, Sacramento, Jonathan, and others. And they have luxe, trendy, informal, creative, and feminine feel to them. And then finally, we have display fonts, which are very bold and very noticeable, and like script fonts, should be used very sparingly. A few examples include Brim Narrow Display, Limelight, Graduate SC, and others. And they also tend to have a very strong, bold, or high-end feel, depending on which font you choose. Usually the safest combination is a sans serif plus a serif font because this creates a very nice contrast and a very nice hierarchy for your typography. So a few examples include Playfair Display and Railway. For example, this is a serif heading, which uses Playfair Display, and then we have a sans serif subheading, which uses Railway, and then you have a body that is set to Railway as well. Then another good pairing is Montserrat and Laura, where we basically use sans serif font such as Montserrat for headings, and then we use a serif font such as Laura for the body text. And then you can also use just one font entirely. For example, using Railway is a great example of creating hierarchy and contrast just by using different weights of the font. Once you have your colors and fonts, you'll want to find the perfect website photos. And the photos you choose for your website should reflect your brand. So in other words, they need to give off the exact vibe that you want visitors to have when they interact with your website. So the first step is to decide on your photography style. Do you gravitate more towards minimal and light photography, dark and moody, black and white photography, or do you want high contrast photos? Do you prefer colorful photos or flat lays? Do you want people in your photos, or do you want no people at all and just feature something like landscapes and office space or just products or whatever your brand is about? Once you decide on that, you need to keep in mind your mood board, and you want to make sure that the photos you choose reflect your mood board and the keywords you narrowed down in previous exercises. And then it's time to actually find the photos. And the best stock photo sites are Unsplash, Pexels, and Ivory Mix. Unsplash and Pexels offer both free and paid photos, and they have literally thousands upon thousands of photos. Ivory Mix is a stock photography membership, and she does have a generous free library that includes something like, I want to say that it's around 500 free photos. And then there is a yearly membership where you can download thousands more. And on top of photos, she also includes Canva templates. And the best thing about her photos is that you can also use them commercially in products that you sell. So how do you actually curate the photos that you found on these websites? So step one, I want you to take your website mood board or style guide and then compare it against your photo collection. Think about whether they look good together. Do they have a cohesive look and feel? If the answer is yes, you're on the right path. Step two, you also want to pay attention to filters used in the photos or just overall color tones that the photo uses. And is the photo on the cooler side or on the warmer side? If there is a bluish tint, then the photo is on the cooler side, while warmer photos will often have a yellowish or reddish tint. And then think about the overall mood of the photos. What feelings come up when you look at them? Like I said, you want to make sure that the mood of the photos matches the mood you want your website to convey. And remember that your images have to appeal to you, but they also have to appeal to your target audience. And finally, remember to look at all the images that you've chosen for your website and then make sure they all flow together nicely. And if there is even a single image that's throwing you off, it's better to leave it out or to find a different one than to keep it no matter how much you like it. And I want to briefly touch on patterns and icons because I know some people want to use additional visual elements in their brand. And yes, there are a fun element that you can add to your website for extra visual appeal, but keep in mind that they're best used as accents. Otherwise, if you add too much of them, then your design can become cluttered and look quite busy rather quickly. Now, how do you actually use design to help you sell? So the first thing that you need to keep in mind is that you want to create a visual hierarchy. Visual hierarchy basically helps us call attention to the things we want users to look at first and bring less attention to the things we want users to look at last. There are several different design rules that you want to keep in mind when you're creating your visual hierarchy. And those 5 rules are scale, color, contrast, alignment, and proximity. The scale refers to the size of the elements. Size is an effective tool for guiding users' eye towards a specific design element. Larger objects draw more attention. Plus, our brains think that larger objects are also more important. So if you want to draw attention to a specific element on your website, then it needs to be larger compared to the other elements in the same section. Color is another effective tool for drawing attention to specific elements on the page. Contrasting bold colors draw our eye almost instantly, which is why the rule is to make sure that your buttons are always of the contrasting color than the rest of your website, because that will draw the user's eye instantly and make them more noticeable to the users. Then we have alignment. Alignment is used as a tool to create order in the design, and that's why so many website builders rely on grid systems to keep elements neatly aligned to the page. Next up is proximity. So proximity is used to group and separate design elements, and it's the quickest way to relate similarities between elements or create a distinction between them. And then we have contrast. You can have changes in color or size that signal that something is different, which draws attention immediately. So in this example, we have 2 circles, one smaller, one bigger. So there is a contrast between their size, but there is also a contrast between their colors because obviously one uses a darker shade of blue than the other. A few other tips to help you create visual hierarchy is that you want to include the most important points in the first 2 paragraphs on the page. And you also want to use headings and subheadings to ensure that they look more important and are more visible than normal text so that users may distinguish them quickly. You also want to start headings and subheadings with the words carrying the most information. Typically, the users see only the first 2 words, and they should still get the gist of the following section just based on those 2 words alone. And then another point is to visually group small amounts of related content by surrounding them with a border or using a different background. And finally, don't be afraid to bold important words and phrases to draw attention to them and to create contrast between the rest of the content on that section or page. Another thing to keep in mind when creating your visual hierarchy is to create a layout that naturally guides the viewer from the headline to CTA. Call to action, or CTA for short, is simply a visual element that entices visitors to take the desired action, such as signing up for a webinar, joining an email list, subscribing to a podcast, completing a purchase, etc. The goal of a CTA is to create a good user experience and help you achieve your business goals. For that reason, you want to use contrasting colors, shapes, sizes, and fonts that are different from your background and other elements on your page, because this will naturally draw a visitor's eye to your CTA. You also want to leave some white space or negative space around your button, as it will create a contrast between your buttons and the rest of the page and reduce distractions. Your button text should be easy to read and understand, and you also want to use fewer words in your buttons and use action phrases and action verbs. And you want to place the most important call to action on any page above the fold. Above the fold is a term used in design to denote the area that you see when you land on a website or a sales page before you have to scroll down. And your most important call to action should be above the fold, or should be visible as soon as somebody lands on your sales page. And finally, let's talk about building trust through design. So before people buy from you, they need to trust you. And there are a few trust indicators that every website should have. And those include trust badges on your sales or checkout pages. They do a great job of establishing trust and ensuring potential buyers their information is safe. And then you can also build trust by using logos of online publications or other reputable websites where you've been featured. Another way to build trust is to display social proof in form of testimonials and reviews, as this helps build trust in your brand. And then, of course, the consistent design throughout your website, social media, and other brand touchpoints builds trust as well. So now that we've covered that, let's recap. The main takeaways from this workshop is that design plays a crucial role in how your business is perceived online. Your website or your sales page design should appeal to your audience, but it should also reflect your personality. Your values and your personality, plus your client's aesthetics, is the recipe for winning website or sales page visuals. When you're creating your website color palette, I want you to choose 3 to 5 colors for your brand and use them consistently everywhere. Create a simple font hierarchy by choosing one heading, one body, and one accent font. And don't forget that your website images should be aligned with the rest of the design choices you've made so far. Design can also help increase your conversion rate through visual hierarchy, optimized calls to action, and carefully selected trust indicators. Now you have the clarity and direction you need to style your website in a way that actually supports your business and not just something that looks nice. If you haven't already, then download the Style to Sell workbook that goes along with this workshop. It will walk you through the exact exercises we covered today so you can define your visual style, choose your colors and fonts, and create a cohesive look for your website. And if you want to skip the guesswork and the endless tweaking, then my Squarespace website templates already have these design principles baked in, from layout and spacing to font hierarchy and visual flow. You can customize one in as little as one weekend and end up with a website that not only looks like you, but is designed to convert. Download your workbook below, check out the templates linked in the description, and start building a website that's styled to sell. And I'll see you in the next one.